Hello and welcome to Living on the Wire for Week 11, our league's inside look at how teams are managing their waiver wire budget. I apologise for the lack of a show last week. Unfortunately, my work actually made me do some work, so I found it hard to make the time. I felt bad by the time I did have free time. The games were underway, and everybody had probably had a good look at what happened. But this week, keen to get back onto it, keen to have a little look. And one of the things I've been thinking about for future improvements is possibly having a waiver wire winner. So having a little look back at who was picked up and, like Steve picking up Taysom Hill near the start and getting that big score out of him to help him win the day, is to have a little look to see who the waiver wire winner was from the last week. So I'll be having a little think about that. Largely because I would have probably given it to myself this week after picking up two players who both did a pretty good job. Uh, Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for me to pick up that win, and my season's now looking a little bit on the dead side. But that doesn't stop everybody else having fun, so here we go. I apologise for my nasally sounding recording today. I have been hit by some kind of cold or flu or bug. But here we go. Let's start off with the big bid boys. And I call them big bid boys, but they're not really big bid boys anymore. We've all run out of money, so we're pretty much just throwing a couple of bucks here or there to pick up who we can. But first off the board was Logan Thomas going to the Balvenie Bruins. Mikey's scooping up the tight end for 10 bucks. A little bit of interest. The 10 bucks was more than enough. He had a season high for his receiving yards and his second highest score of the season. And earlier in the season, when I had him into cover for Kittle, he did a fantastic job and helped me actually win one of my games. So Mikey's hoping he gets the same kind of return and the same kind of luck for a player back from injury who's starting to heat up as the season goes on, as are the Commandos. So that could be some smart business there. Next up, Greg at the Lions, picking up Williams, who is due back. He is due back this week off the PUP and previously off the IR. And he's only had to drop Marvin Jones, who hasn't particularly been playing very well in that Jacksonville offense. So, yeah, a bit of a roll of the dice, but if he comes back and plays as well as he's supposed to, he could be a better option for covering your bye week or for sticking in your flex. And there was a few bids in there for him as well. Next up, a gentleman that I lost out on, Andy's Owls have picked up Pirine. Now, I quite like Samaje Perine. I quite fancied him, especially because there's a chance that Mixon, if he's going through a concussion protocol, might not be playing. They're obviously missing Chase at wide receiver. Pirine can do, a little bit of receiving work. He can do a lot of running work. He kind of gets chucked in quite often for those, third down attempts, and he just has a habit of scoring random touchdowns here, there, and everywhere, and having random big scores in certain weeks. And I think for the next week or two, he's probably going to see a lot of action while those injuries get solved. So a couple of bids in there, including from myself, but the winning bid for $8, he's off to the Owls. Then Mikey picking Robert Woods back up. Robert Woods had a cracking week as him and Tannehill starting to connect a bit better. The Titans starting to offer a little bit more on offense and looking like the team maybe they thought they would be at the start of the season. And all he's had to do is drop Case Keenum, who he doesn't really need anymore anyways. He was just cover for his QB in case he was out last week. So he's not really had to give up a lot, but he has had to pay some money to pick his own player back up, which can be super frustrating, as I myself have had to do a couple of times this season. Then the little bitty boys, but actually I feel like this week they're all kind of little bitty boys. We're just scooping up what we can to cover those little gaps here and there. But the buy apocalypse is fading and we don't need quite as many players. But we've got Allen. Allen doing his usual thing of trying to scoop up every single defense and then just whichever one he went for first that goes through is the one that he gets. So he's picked up the Dolphins for a few bucks there. And yeah, fresh off their bye, they've been starting to play well. The team's playing well. Whereas the Cardinals don't seem to be doing anything particularly well right now. And so probably a good idea to shift that defense on, especially with their quarterback issues. there's a good chance that their defence will have to do a lot of work and may end up conceding a few more points. And Allen wasn't the only person interested. And then Downey, Robin Downey, picking up for the Claymores, Ryan Succop, who, as Tampa Bay start to improve and start to score more points, more opportunities for the kicker. And obviously, Fairburn at the Texans, probably a team that are scoring less and less points. So probably just who's going to have the most opportunity to score, kicker for a kicker. And then Allen, in a bid to make sure that he's ready to beat me, to beat the mighty Wildcats. Allen's Chieftains have scooped up Ryan Tannehill, probably the best quarterback left out there that you could scoop up, just in case his beloved quarterback, who's been winning him games for the last few weeks, finally winning Allen a few games. But Fields didn't look quite right there, not quite too sure. There seemed to be an injury, then a different injury, and he just looked generally quite shaken, and I'd be surprised if he's back, or even if he is back this week. Will he be the same player? Will there be enough time to fully recover? Or will they go elsewhere? So Allen's just making sure he's covered. He's got Tannehill in. Tannehill had a great week, and he's looking more and more consistent. Could be smart business there, picking up that cover. And then the next one, Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming to the Wildcats, and bye-bye to the Tennessee Titans. Titans have done me proud. They've got me lots more points than maybe I thought they would. They've crawled me through a few games, picking up a win here or there that I might have lost out on without them. But I needed something a bit more consistent, and with Tampa Bay improving and getting better and trying to make that push to try and make that playoff berth, I feel like their defense is just going to be a little bit spicier for the next couple of weeks. But we will see. I was not the only person who bid. In fact, I believe Allen actually outbid me for the Tennessee Titans, but because he'd already scooped up the Dolphins, that was put through to myself, which I'm quite glad for. And then we got our cheap as chips. And yep, I think Allen again just being cautious. If the Bears are without their high scoring quarterback, will they score as many points? Will their kicker get as many opportunities to score points? He's just moving away from the Bears offense sensibly so, and just making sure that he's covered, kicker for a kicker. And Seattle are playing well, scoring a lot, so their kicker should have a good shout to get you points too. Then, as I said before, the Titans are improving, and as they improve, it's more and more points for Burks. Just probably had his best game of the season so far, definitely in fantasy, and I think in real life as well. Actually looked like an improving player and making more connections with Tannehill. So good move there by Brian, scooping him up for the Tomahawks. And then Keith dug deep for Andy Dalton. It's hard. You can look back at all these scores for Andy Dalton and what's going on. Some weeks he'll get you 37 points and he'll have so many touchdown throws you'll just be like, what's happening? The next week he might get you 8 points and all the touchdowns are ran in by Taysom Hill, covering that weird role that he does where he's not quite a quarterback, not quite a tight end. But he seems to have been consistent in the last week or two, and not bad to have covered just for that high ceiling. A roll of the dice. Is he going to get you those big points? If he does, it could win you the game. And then Telfy scooping up Matt Breda, a common name that I'm sure at some point in all our years of fantasy, every single one of us has probably picked him up at some point for a game here or there. And he's just been snapped up to try and place Blackshear. Blackshear, who I think people thought when Big CMC headed out to San Francisco that Blackshear might see more snaps, a bit more action. But really, it's all been about Deonta. So, yeah, why not try out somebody else? And then the afterthoughts. These people were kind of all scooped up later in the day. So the last one of the waiver wires that went through was Downey dropping the Jets, the number 6 ranked defense, and picking up Seattle Seahawks, the ranked number 5 defense, but they are fresh off their bye. And the Jets have had a couple of bad results. Even though their defenses have scored well, you wonder what sort of effect that starts to have on the team. So, yeah, probably a pretty safe pickup there for Downey. Although I'll be watching carefully as I don't think there's going to be a lot in that one, to be honest. And then we go on to the tail phase. So first of all, he's picked up a new defense. He's got the Colts, who seem to be improving, whereas the Saints are a bit up and down. So just probably hoping for a bit more consistency there with that one. And then he's just done a little wide receiver trade as DeMarcus had a fantastic fantasy performance last week. And if he can keep that up, he'll be far more dangerous than Little Ben, who, despite Cup not being there, really hasn't done much of anything and finds himself still quite down the pecking order as far as action and game time is playing. And then on to our last ones. I've zipped through this one today. I hope my nasally, cold-like voice hasn't put anybody off listening this far. But we've got Dicker the kicker, gone to the Owls, and he's dropping Greg the leg. I think after that shocker from the Vikings, you just don't know what to expect. So why not just pick up someone who might just be a touch more consistent? And then Brian picking up our last two moves. Going to the Tomahawks. We've got Marlon Mack, who might be starting to get a bit more game time there in Denver. But he's definitely going to be getting more than Chuba Hubbard, who I think we all thought when CMC left Carolina that Chuba Hubbard would get a bit more action. But again, it's just all going to Foreman. Deontay Foreman just seems to be picking up everything. He seems to have just filled that role perfectly. I don't know why they don't spread it around the running backs, but here we are. Chuba Hubbard, who could a couple of times last season won people games when CMC was out injured, just doesn't seem to be getting a look in this year. And then finally, also to the Tomahawks, Sky Moore. Kansas City starting to really spread the ball around well to all their wide receivers. They seem to do a good job of sharing things around. There's still some guys who are shaking off injuries, and he's been picking up more points, getting more love. Whereas Alex Pierce, ever since Matty Ice has come back into the Colts starting lineup, has just gone back to being that kind of afterthought wide receiver. So yeah, why not try and pick up somebody who's in slightly better form? And then on to our awards. Big spender goes to Mikey. I believe he dropped a whole $10 getting himself that tight end. Thomas from the Commandos. And then we've got Greg still saving up. He's got $70 left. At this point, could outbid us a couple of times over, as I don't know if many people even have $50 or more. And then You Tried. You Tried was tricky this week. So we had a few people who missed out on two players, but Steve, I went with your Springbank Sharks because you did try to go for two of the big money waiver wire bids there and missed out. Hopefully you've managed to figure out a way to plug that gap. Now I'm going to finish you off with a funny little story. So my little chap, who we all know celebrated the fire truck's arrival and the firemen's arrival by dropping trow, this week decided to do something very, very, very odd indeed when he found out that teachers were striking and he wouldn't have to go to school on Thursday. He decided to run around the room, seeing if he could hit everybody in the bum, shouting, "Bumba Lamba Lamba," which made everybody kind of laugh until eventually we started to feel a little bit awkward. And then he started tipping off chairs and having a wee cry. So, that was my morning. As always, ladies and gentlemen, may the fantasy gods be kind. Except to you, Alan. Fuck you, Alan.